Hello, welcome to the March 15th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field, or you could simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's 11, 12, 13, which level of Cubase you're running, such as Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which operating system, that information would be helpful. We should have all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream indexed and pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for different topics, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and there's almost 32,000 different topics that you could access in cubaseindex.com. So we want to give Jan a special thanks for his efforts in creating that website. We also have two people that serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. We want to give them a special thanks. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience. And we'll give Jazz Dude special kudos also for his efforts with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host. I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria, Virginia, or outside of Washington, D.C., in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live or if you're watching afterwards, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin our session. All right, Best Green Jesus has the first question. Where do I change which MIDI channel is drawn into MIDI Editor? I understand I could change the channel afterwards, but I like to specify which channel I'm drawing in prior. All right, so I think it's based on, so if we're drawing in MIDI, it's going to be an event that's on a track. So I believe that if we have our MIDI channel here, and let's set it to MIDI channel 1, that as I draw in notes, and we look at the channel information for that, let me just, I have this set to channel 3. Sorry, so let's say if we come over and we have the MIDI channel here set to channel 1, that as I draw notes in, that these notes, when we look at them in our info line, will just show us that they are all on MIDI channel 1. If I change the channel that the event is on, let's say to channel 3, as I draw in notes, all of these notes are now on MIDI channel 3. So it really just follows whatever the channel is set to directly here from the inspector. So we select the track, we see MIDI channel 3. So now if I wanted to draw notes on MIDI channel 2, I could just come and draw a note on channel 2. And as we select this, this will be on channel 2. The notes we previously drew in on channel 3 will still be retained. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Jack B. All right, he asks, is there a way to mute all automation across numerous tracks quickly? So if you have all the tracks selected, we could come over here and hit the R button, and that's the, for read automation. So if we wanted to just, come over here, not the R button, but if we just, so if we click on the R button, we could do that. But if we go to the Project Logical Editor, we could set up a script to do this pretty quickly. So let's check it out. So let's go to our Project Logical Editor under the project menu, and we say we want to say our container type is equal to a track. And so we're going to transform. So we want to transform tracks And let's go to under our event actions area. We'll say track operation. And let's choose, I think we could do read and just choose to disable. So if I have read enabled for multiple tracks here, I can now run this project logical editor and disable the read. And if you wanted to toggle that as well, so we can now take all the selected tracks, turn read on and read off for all of my tracks, just like that. So once again, go to the, you want to choose that we're going to transform. Container type is equal to track. The track operation, we can set read, and you could enable, disable, or toggle. And you could save that as a preset if you wanted to. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we have question in Nuendo 13 in system components, extensions, the Melodyne and spectral layers, check marks are grayed out, and they cannot be selected activated. And program plugins, ADR, ARA services, more, M1 Monterey. So let me know if they, so let's just come over. Let's see if it's under. See if it's under the system. So let me know if they actually just show up. So if we're here and how you see that they work, you know, so I'm just having a brain cramp on this where to find that. But if we come over and go to the extensions, do you see the spectral layers and your Melodyne showing up as extensions? So they generally won't work as like a typical VST plugin. So let me just see if we, maybe it's under kind of the plugin manager. If we see, or let me just, sorry for having my brain cramp on this. Oh, system component information. Okay. So we go to extensions. So mine, so I'm running on an M1 as well. So mine are showing up as checked, but let me know if, you know, if you're which versions. So I guess yours are grayed out here. But mine, so I'm not sure if there's many changes you can do, but let me know if they show up as extensions here. But, you know, make sure that you have the latest versions of the plugins as well. And let me know also if you're running it in Apple Silicon Native or if you're running it under Rosetta. Because, you know, depending on if you're running Apple Silicon or Native, you may, or Rosetta, you may have to update to later versions. But it seems, you know, it's working fine on my M1 processor. All right, so we see Patrick, he says, hi Greg, have you seen my email about CPU thread allocation yet? So I kind of read through it briefly. Let's go ahead and add it in for our questions toward the end, but we'll go ahead and go through it now. Okay, so Patrick's question about CPU allocations. Says, I'm currently testing Vienna Ensemble Pro with my Nuendo setup, and this prompted me to try and understand Nuendo's multi-threading a bit better. My test effect reflect both my and my friend's situation accurately. I'm running a top-of-the-line AMD chip. He's running a top-of-the-line Intel chip. Both of us have modern motherboards, quick NVMe SSDs, and plenty of quick RAM. My experiment. I tried running both Vienna Ensemble Pro and Nuendo as the platform for my mixing template. I noticed that the impact of the template on my computer's CPU aligned with my past experiences. However, what surprised me was the direct correlation between Vienna Ensemble Pro's CPU consumption and Nuendo's CPU meter, even though the built-in Windows CPU meter indicates that most threads remain unused. It appears that my understanding of real-time processing might be flawed, as similar issues persist across different audio software I use. My anecdotal evidence thus far shows me that DAW CPU readouts of 100% align about 30% total CPU usage according to Task Manager. This is a shared experience between me and my previously mentioned friend running Intel 13900K CPU. I tried addressing this by limiting the affinity of Vienna Ensemble Pro and Nuendo via the Task Manager, hoping to isolate each software to half the available threads. Unfortunately, this adjustment did not yield any different results. Furthermore, notice that regardless of whether Vienna Ensemble Pro or Nuendo were running the plugins, the performance meter of Nuendo remained consistent. I'm reaching out to ask further understanding on how Nuendo is using my computer's resources and if real-time audio processing abilities in general don't overlap with the full power the CPU has to offer. This is a topic that I found really difficult to research, and no one really seems to have an answer to this weird thread allocation. I appreciate any insights or recommendations you can provide. Okay, so with this, so we could think of the performance meter that we see in Cubase. When we look at this, we'll go to, let's say, our we go to our audio performance. This isn't a CPU meter. So CPU meters and audio performance are two different things that shouldn't really be associated with each other. So realize that, when we're dealing with multi-core CPUs, and this works, as you kind of discovered, this will be consistent from every DAW. So, if we have one track going on of audio, and let's say at this point, we have all these different plugins on this particular track. So one track can access only one CPU core. So if we have 16 plugins on one track, that's only going to be utilizing one CPU core. So each plugin isn't going to be allocated to different processors on a track. It's just not how the multi-threading works with multi-processors. Also, when we have an instrument, so let's say we have an instrument similar to that's multi-timbral, and we open it up. Let me just open one up here. So let's say we go to this Halion Sonic instance, and we have 16 instruments here. One instrument can use one, for the most part, generally in 99% of instruments, that if you could run multiple sounds in it, this one instrument can only utilize one CPU thread. So if we, for the most part, if we load up 16 sounds, we could kill our audio performance, of overloading one CPU of multiple CPUs. So again, audio performance and CPU performance are really different. Now, some instruments like Halion is pretty smart in that we could go to the options and actually choose under our multi-core to have multiple threads available within the particular instrument. The vast majority of instruments don't offer that as an option. So it is possible to basically overload a single processor, and that affects your audio performance as opposed to all the available resources. And it's just how multi-processors work. It's not that every single note, if you play 16 notes in a chord, that each of those notes are going to different processors. So these tasks will be kind of utilized on a single track, or for the most part, a single instrument. So there isn't a direct correlation between those two. So I think there's a really good YouTube video, and I'm sure Jazz Dude will probably put the link in it, kind of explaining audio performance. And because when we're dealing with audio performance, it also makes a big difference on the buffer size. And that's something that's not reflected in CPU performance. So when you have much smaller buffers, it's harder for the program to access. We could think of it like a conveyor belt. And if your job, think of the classic I Love Lucy. She's working in a factory and they have to put the widget into a box. And if those boxes have bigger intervals, it's, let's say you get one box every 10 seconds, that it's easy to put that in a box, close the box, and put the box on the next conveyor belt. But if you have, instead of one box per 10 seconds, you say we want one box every 2 seconds, one box every second. That's a lot more work than having to, even though it's kind of the same physical thing, but just having to split those tasks into smaller intervals of running a smaller buffer makes the computer work harder. So that doesn't necessarily reflect on the CPU. It's not necessarily using more CPU, but it is using more audio performance. So audio performance is kind of more practical for, how it's going to relate to your buffer size, how your plugins are allocated across different tracks. So many people, instead of running an instrument that has 16 sounds or 64 sounds loaded in a single instance, will run multiple instances of that same instrument because each of those instances can be split across different CPU cores. And this isn't anything that one program does better than others. This is just how the multi-threading works with computer operating systems. So let me know if that makes sense. But I'm sure JazzDude will share the link as well. And thanks for your question, Patrick. All right, always wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. We see Taylor from Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index wishing everyone a happy Friday from Stockholm. All right, Music for World Peace Records asks, how can I import a loop from a large screen loop browser and have it placed below a selected track rather than the bottom of the track list? Okay, so let's say I want my loop to go directly below this track. So let's see if I just drag a loop out and I place it, you see this little green line as I drag. If I double click on a loop here, it will place it at the bottom of the track because we haven't defined where we want that loop to go. Now if I just drag that loop, we can, I think if we just drag it over, that now we could place that loop exactly where we want. Because otherwise, do you want Cubase to put it on a track? Do you want it to put it in between tracks? How would Cubase necessarily know? So if you just double click, it's going to be added to the bottom. It'll create a new track. If we drag the loop over, and where we see the green divider line between the tracks, we can then place that particular loop where we want. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Taylor. All right, so we see Uno Momento checking in from Finland. Says the break time is increasing all the time very nicely. So it's nice to have, we already switched over daylight saving time here in the US, so it's nice to have that extra hour of light at the end of the day. All right, so Music for World Peace Records asks, will a 5G router such as T-Mobile sending a Wi-Fi signal to my computer at 866 megabytes be stable enough connection for VST Connect? You could try it, so the big variable is that Wi-Fi networks can often speed up and slow down like as needed by the Wi-Fi signal. So if something else kind of joins a network, that could affect the speed of that. And with a wired connection, you don't necessarily run into that inconsistency of the data transmission rates. So for the most part, people will recommend that you use a wired connection for more consistency. If it's the kind of situation where you don't have kids that are playing, I was on a virtual meeting for work, and one of the guys had to go tell his kid who was on spring break to stop playing the game because he couldn't talk for his normal kind of Microsoft Teams meeting because I was using his speed was going up and down depending on what the game was going on. So if you don't have other aspects such as gaming or other people using it, there's a good chance you may be fine. You could always try it out, but again, you could have fluctuations in those particular signals in the speed. And sometimes when you're doing a real-time recording, you don't want those fluctuations in the data transmission. All right, see Jan from Cubase Index, thanking Jazz Dude for the super fantastic Cubase Nation Discord. All right, we have the artist known as Love checking in. Says, thank you for everything, Greg. You're welcome. Music for World Peace Records asks, is there a limit to the length of a groove that can be dragged into the quantize panel for groove quantizing? Let's just give it a quick shot here. I'll create a 2-bar groove and we'll just copy that. Okay, and I'll just quantize this so we have some kind of groove. Okay, and I'll just repeat this a bunch of times. Okay. So I'll join all these together. Hold down, grab my glue gun, hold down the Alt or Option key. All right, so this is going to be 10 minutes and 24 seconds. So let's see if we could drag that in. So looks like it might take the first 16 bars. Let's see. So it might be 16 measures for the groove. And let's see if I just drag a longer audio file in. So let's say this is more than 16 measures. If we get, yeah, so it looks like 16 bars is the length of the particular groove quantize preset. So let me know if that's enough. Okay, so the artist known as Love wants everyone to please hit the like button. Great, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, so Music for World Peace Records asks, what's the fastest way to clean up a MIDI track extracted from a vocal track? Okay, I'm going to take these parts and we will consolidate them. So let's go to my audio to bounce selection. And I will go to Very Audio. So I think a lot of times what you could do is if you're doing the editing within Very Audio, is to make sure, like, if you have like little segments like this. So let's say we have, realize that this is probably just kind of a transition. So we could do this editing inside of VariAudio, and if we want to join those segments together just by kind of clicking on it. So this is probably going to be one note that's out of tune, that drifts flat. So if we wanted to just kind of come over here and, we could join these particular notes together. Sorry about hitting my mic. So, while we come, sorry, let me just put these on, or show all smart controls. So, like, as we want to do this, being able to kind of join the different segments together where you can in VariAudio. So, once you're here, also we could just say, let's take this, and we're going to take the VariAudio, and let's extract the MIDI functions. So now as we come over here, we could see, and at this point you may want to say, you could even have Project Logical Editor presets where if notes are below a certain length that you could do that, but kind of realize that, like, when you're looking at it in VariAudio, that this is, we can think of this as a representation of what can be created in the MIDI domain. So, and a lot of the little segments that are kind of valuable for cleaning up the vocal as well will be carried over when converting it to MIDI data. All right, Music for World Peace Records asks, is there a way to see how many cents you are changing pitch in Microtuner? So I guess it's maybe the Microtuner plugin is the MIDI plugin. So let's come over here to this. We'll go to our MIDI insert. Okay. So, and we could see the value here. So from here to here is going to be 100 cents. So that would be one semitone. So the number at the top that we see is right here. So we're at -2. So that would be the cents indicated right there for each of the notes. So if I wanted to adjust the Microtuner there, we could see this value above, and that would indicate how many cents the particular Microtuner is employing. All right, Music for World Peace Records asks, why do some notes in the score editor double two notes in on or same patch on one stem, and how can this quickly be cleaned up? So a lot of times what could happen is, let's say if we have a musical phrase, and if you have a MIDI controller itself that is sometimes when notes are doubled, it may be that the MIDI controller that you're using is transmitting on two separate MIDI channels at once. So what happens is a lot of times people may be on, and we see this with when they're using a kind of a hardware keyboard as their controller, something like a montage. When you play a note and it's playing like this beautiful patch of 3 or 4 different voices, like piano, acoustic piano, Rhodes strings, and organ kind of layered beautifully together, that when you play that, it's actually transmitting multiple notes. And at that point, you could just go directly into and when you look at it in the list editor. So let me just see if I could create an example of it here. So I'm going to all right, so I'm going to change all these MIDI notes to channel 12, and I'm just going to drag this over top, and I will merge these together. All right, so now when I look at this, we may say, okay, and I see the notes, and then sometimes we get this question when, okay, I erase a note and it's still there sometimes. So like sometimes it seems like you have to erase it twice. So what we could do is often look at this in the MIDI list editor. So if I merge those correctly, we may see that we have every note is repeated by channel 12, channel 13, 12, 13, that these are just going to be alternating. So our MIDI controller is transmitting multiple channels. When we look at this in our score editor, it may look a bit nonsensical. So let's just make it split. And why we're seeing this is just because, again, we have our MIDI controller that's transmitted multiple notes. So at this point, if I was in a situation like this, I could say I want to delete one of the MIDI channels, and we could come over here and we will set our filters. We'll enable our filters by default, and we'll say we want to filter event channels. So now I selected all MIDI channel 12. I'm going to select all the notes, hit delete, and now when we go into the score editor, our doubles will be eradicated. So it could be that your MIDI controller, as you're inputting, is actually transmitting two MIDI channels at once. And then we go to look in the score editor, those two notes are kind of stacked. So you may have to go into the list editor and just simply delete the doubled notes to fix that solution. So let me know if that helps you, Taylor. That makes sense. All right. See Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. Peter Wild saying hi from Switzerland. All right, we have DJFK wishing everyone a happy Friday from Germany. See, Best Green Jesus says that's perfect. Looks like I was looking in the wrong area. Thank you. So you're welcome. Thanks for being on. Always great to have you on. See, Michael Team says he's on the phone today. Internet is heavy weather, so ice cream is on hold. So sorry, everybody. All right, we'll all have to give Michael Teams virtual gifts in lieu of that. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen from Finland. Thanks for being on again. Great to see Peter Bata on from Montreal. All right, so just see from Billy Caffendrin just says no. Let me see if it's from. Okay, so I guess it's with the spectral layers. So you say no. If you could specify if they're. Okay, so I see that they are the latest versions. So, everything seems to be working on my end, but if you want to send me an email, I could do some more research on it. You could reach out to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay. All right, great to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us. All right, Peter Wild just says Cubase. Greg, do you know if the Cubasis for Android is compatible with Cubase Pro 13 on Windows? So I think once you have it in, that you could download like the Cubasis project importer So when you come over here, you could now just choose to import a QBasis project. So you may have to share it to a cloud drive or a external USB, but you can just come right over here, and then I think it's a separate install. I don't think it comes with QBase. I could be mistaken on that, but all you'd have to do now is just choose to import the QBasis project, and I'm almost positive that's the same on Windows and Mac. See, Michael Teen says hard to see everything on this little bitty screen. So we hope. Sorry that your power is out, but thanks for making the live stream regardless. All right, so Steve Zinn says, thanks for bringing back the vocoder. I asked you several times. Last time I asked you, you said you had mentioned it's back. It's just as great as it used to be. Just wanted to say thanks. So, yep, Steinberg does a good job of listening to, to the customers. So, and any comments, they monitor these live streams pretty well. All right, so we see from Billy Caffedrin with his spectral layers and his ARA issues, says Nuendo 12 does not have this problem I'm having with version 13. So just out of curiosity, when you start your Nuendo 13, if you hold down, I think you mentioned you're on M1 Mac, but hold down Command Option Shift, start the program and hold down Command Option Shift and try to disable the program preferences temporarily and see if that makes a difference. So once you double click the program, hold down Command Option Shift, and you'll see just a little window like this. I'll show you. So I'll start Nuendo 13. Now I'm holding down those keys, and you'll get this like safe mode starting. So let's try just clicking on Disable Program Preferences. I'll just boot mine up normally and see if that makes a difference. But I'll take a look at my Nuendo 13, and we'll go to the system components and take a look at it. Yeah, mine are just working, but try to see what happens if you disable the program preferences, if that makes any difference for you. Okay, so we see Jazz Dude posted a link on the QBase 13 tutorial on the QBase 13 vocoder. All right, wonderful to see Val checking in from Vienna. All right, we see a question from Jav. How does the multi-sound work in Halligan Sonic 7? Okay, so let's take a look. So I'm not sure if it's what the multi-sound or the multi-patch is. So let's take a look. So we'll come here, let's open up the instrument. So if we want it to come over here, so we could have, so let's say if I'm layering different sounds together here, and like I was going out playing live. Okay, so I think that we could come over here and let's save the multi-channel. So we'll come here, say March 15th. That now if we I'll just cut these programs. So now if I just come over here, double click, I'll just do it on, okay. Okay, so I'll just do a new instance of Howling in Sonic 7. And now our so we can load up to 16 different channels of sounds as one single preset. So let me know if that's what you mean by multi-sound. Okay, so question from Val. He says, my question today is why my Howling Sonic always recognizes my MIDI keyboard as instrument 4, not 1. So is your MIDI keyboard, is your controller transmitting on a particular MIDI channel? So is it that when you start playing that it only goes to sound 4 and not sound 1? If that's the case, it could be that when you're going to add the instrument, and it could be that we don't necessarily see it here, but check to see if when you're doing it that the track itself, if you're loading a MIDI track, so let's say if I load a MIDI track and then I want that to go to Howling 7 and this is set to channel 4, we could do that. So let's say I want to add a MIDI track again. So it looks like it defaults to channel 1. But Val, if you could let me know if it's when you load Howling Sonic, it's going to channel 4, and that could be maybe your controller is set to transmit on MIDI channel 4 and not MIDI channel 1. But generally, the selected channel will do all of the routing for you. But if you could clarify that, that would be helpful for me. Okay. All right, Jav asks, please explain what you just said about the different instances in Halion. So a lot of times when people will use like third-party instances, instead of if we loaded up 16 sounds in most VST instruments, all 16 sounds are going to be utilizing one CPU core. So instead of having one instrument with 16 sounds, if we have 16 instruments with one sound, those would be split across CPU cores. Now, Halion is kind of an exception in that there is multi-core support directly inside of Halion, but not all multi-timbral instruments offer this. So if we load up 16 sounds, one instrument, that's going to utilize one CPU core for that instrument. Whereas if we load up 16 different instruments with one sound, those would be split across the different processors more evenly to distribute the processing load. So let me know if that's what you're looking for. All right, we have Darren Flake checking in from Toronto, wishing everyone a happy Friday. Thanks for joining us. Wonderful to see John Barry checking in from the English Riviera. Glad you can make it today. And we have Roland Stuff checking in from Sussex in the UK. Best Korean Jesus says, thank you for answering my question. I'm always learning something every live stream, so I usually learn new stuff as well. And thanks for asking your question for the benefit of others. my chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot. See, Swaff says, is laughing out loud that there is waiting for it to start, apparently needed to refresh. So sorry about that, but you can catch up. We're glad you're on. All right, so we see DJFK says, is that working in Cubase 11? I see it might have been from Jazz Dude's comment that was around for MIDI extraction from audio. So yes, that works the same way ever since Vari Audio was introduced in Cubase 5. Always wonderful to see Razel from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. See, Taylor from Music for World Peace Records says, thanks, Greg. I'm a Cubase user for almost 20 years and still learning. It's kind of a lifetime educational pursuit. So. All right, Roland Stuff says, hi, Greg. What are the different volume types in MIDI-only channels, lane, modulation, use, global settings, average, etc.? Whatever you select for one MIDI channel seems to be set for all. Okay, so let's take a look. So let's say we have this MIDI track. Okay. All right, so let's say if I want to go to another MIDI track, come here. So I will set this to average. We'll see if all right, so let me just, I don't know off the top of my head, but let's take a look at it. So let's say we do this, and let's see if we go, it might be tied into CC automation setup. So it does look like kind of a global setting. So let's say if I'm here on this MIDI track, I'll just solo. All right. Okay, I'll put this into, I'll just do a quick little automation loop here. So let's say if I'm writing, so let me just write automation. Okay, so now that I have my MIDI volume, and this is for MIDI CC data. So if we say, let's replace the part range, and then as soon as I let go, it will do that. And let's say replace, this is almost looks like maybe the automation. So as soon as I let go of that particular fader, it went back to the existing automation. Now that I have last value continues, I do this. Let's see if I just come here. So while I'm touching it, it writes in that value. So let's see what happens if we go to our average. So if this will kind of overwrite. So I'll do some more research on that and see if I can have an answer for Tuesday's live stream to kind of explain that better. So I'll look into that so I give a better answer on that. So I'm not quite seeing the differences. I'm sure that there's kind of distinct reasons, but it seems like it's all doing kind of similar things. But let's say if I draw this in, and let's see if I have modulation here. Kind of seems to be similar functions, but I'll see if I can have a better answer for that on Tuesday. Sorry about that, rolling stuff. All right, great to see Ayuel on. All right, so you just see from DJFK Headroom, and what is your save place? All right. Maybe if you could ask those questions, I could understand a little better if you ask in a different way. Music for World Peace Records asks, when program preferences are disabled on startup, can they be enabled without restarting Cubase? So to get the program preferences to come back, you would need to restart Cubase. So when we disable the program preferences, we could think of it as almost kind of like going on a clean slate, so that we don't re-enable them when the preferences are disabled. So those preferences are kind of loaded up at the start. So to get the existing preferences to go, we would need to restart the program because those preferences are loaded up, to actually, the starting condition of the program. All right, great to see Coast Mastering on. Hope you're doing well, Michael. All right, wonderful to see Patrick Emmanuel A back on. It says, hi, Greg. Happy to be on live after a long time. My question is, what composers thinking about AI, its creation of music is getting better day by day? What do pros think? Will there be composers? So I think that there will always be composers. There's, obviously AI has probably been, I think people are still writing books. People are still writing movie scripts. I don't think that, those have been replaced by AI. I think AI is probably more advanced with just kind of text data. We've had different discussions about, the role of AI in a composer's workflow. I remember several years ago we had a meeting with Tom Hulkenberg, or Junkie XL, who's just an amazing composer and very visionary thinker. And at that time, he was working with different teams. I think he was working with Stanford on some AI composition stuff, and he thought it was okay. He was like, it's good enough for like background music for YouTube, for like a YouTube video that you would get a music library for, but it would, it's like at this point it would never be used in a film or a TV show. There's always the premise that sometimes composers on big projects, the whole thing is about generating money for the film as well. And, sometimes the mystique of a film is the budget that was spent. So at times, I remember one time just chatting with Hans Zimmer, and I think when he did the 5 drummers, I think it was for Superman, he got like 5 great session drummers in a room all at once. And I was at his studio maybe like a week before, and he's like, this is either going to be like the greatest thing, or it's going to be the biggest catastrophe. But if I don't go for it, if I don't do this, I could get a big budget for doing something so outrageous, and I have a budget. And if I get a budget, musicians can work. So there's a part of that as well, of making sure that people in the process can still be employed and can still do really exciting work. So, everyone, it's a discussion, but a lot of the factors, recently after the NAMM show, we're visiting different studios. We went to like Star Parodies, we went to Ludwig Göransson's studio, and we're talking to his staff. And, stuff that they want AI for sometimes is not for the composition, but just, I just want these files to be rendered better, like kind of just tedious tasks in the background that they want, and not necessarily for the creative aspect of the composition. So it's obviously kind of a white hot topic of the role of AI. I think other industries may be affected more before kind of true creators there's obviously a lot of articles written on the web that you could tell are written kind of by Chat GPT. When you have kind of like a clickbait thing, where it's the intention of the article is to make you scroll through ads that they can then monetize. But I don't think that, we will have just like an amazing, I think for a long time that the human creative spirit will kind of outshine. And sometimes, maybe if your project is getting replaced by AI, or if your work is getting replaced by AI, maybe it's, I would try to make my work better so that it couldn't be replaced by AI. So maybe it'll kind of elevate the standards for everyone as well. But I think that people will still want to make and create music, and there's a human and emotional connection that's really viable and powerful. That is what humans can offer. So, all right, next, but wonderful to have you back, Patrick. All right, Xerix M, I'm sorry, asks, "Hi Greg, I have a drum MIDI track which triggers perfect drums. I want to use that same MIDI to activate a snare in Kontakt. New track. Every time D1 hits, how does one do this? Similar scenario for kick." Okay, so let's say we'll start off. All right, let me just do new project here. Okay, so I'll add an instrument track here. So we'll do just a groove agent. All right, so I'm just going to drag a pattern over. All right, so now we'll play this pattern. And I'll just slow it down to something a little more reasonable. All right, so say I wanted to take this, and I have a different source, so I'll just load up a drum inside of Hali and Sonic. So let's load up a drum kit. Okay, so let's say this is our C1. Okay, so a couple ways that you could approach this. So if I wanted to take my C1 notes here, so we'll look at this in, let's say, our drum editor. So as we scroll up, we could come over here. So we play this. So I want to take the kick and snare from this part and augment it with another part. So one way is to say, I want to take this. We could use a logical editor. So let's say our kick is on C1 and our snare is on D1. So let's go to our MIDI to logical editor. We're going to say type is equal to notes. I think if we choose extract to track, okay, and we're going to say the pitch is going to be equal, or we'll set it to a fixed value of C1. Okay, so I think if I did this right, that we can now extract this. Okay, so let's look at. All right, let me just we'll undo that, and let me just get rid of this. I think they're. Sorry, let me just go to the logical editor again. And let me just try the insert. Or insert exclusive, trying to remember. Okay. Okay, so let's say insert exclusive, if that will. All right, let me just. All right, how I would do it. So if we didn't want to take the logical editor approach to kind of extract those notes, is I would come over here. Let's make this into our drum editor. So we'll go to MIDI. I'm going to take like the first one here, and let's just load up a drum map for it. So we'll select this track. And for our drum map, we'll go to our, we'll start with just our drum map from Groove Agent. So I'm going to create my drum map from the instrument. So now when we double click, we could see our kick and snare. And if we just kind of slide this over, so let's say we have kick and snare. Instead of this going to track, I'm going to edit this drum map. So we go to our drum map setup. I will make a copy of this. We'll take this, I'll make a copy. And we'll just call this hybrid. Okay, so now let's make this full screen. I think that now we made a new drum map that we can take our kicks that were on C1, and let me just see if they're not fixed to a track. But we can do it within, let me select the correct, make sure I'm on the right drum map. So we'll make this called our hybrid map. Okay. So now when we do this, we can see that these are set to tracks, but I could also say, okay, I want to take my kick drum here, and I could send this out to my Halion Sonic. So as we listen to it now, I could take this and send it to different destinations if you wanted to. So you could now just come over here, and instead of it being sent to the particular track, I could say, let's go to our drum map one more time. Sorry, it's all kind of tied into drum maps, but and we could say, okay, I want this on to go out to not the track, but to Halion Sonic. Let's see. So usually we could just all right, another approach that we could do is simply take the kick and snare, copy, paste, and now we could have both of those tracks kind of playing simultaneously. So now we could have the kick and snare from the original track, and I could just copy and paste those. And there is a way in a logical editor to kind of do that. Let me just try one more time in a logical editor. I won't spend too much more time on it, but let's. Hang on just one second. All right. All right, so I may have to leave the live stream a little early to pick up my wife from a medical thing, but just wanted to, so let's see if we can get this sorted out. All right. So I want to say it's maybe insert exclusive, say type is equal. Let's just try this, sorry. Type is equal to note, and we will say pitch is going to be C1. And let's come over here, and we'll also choose pitch as our subtype. All right, so we look at this. Let's try just insert into this track. I'll have this selected. Now I'll just try extract to track here. So now we could just extract those parts to a track. So if I'm here, take this, we'll extract two tracks. We're going to take our C1 and D1. So as we do this, extract a track, and then all those will show up, and we can do it and have both. So that's an easier way to do it. So sorry it took a while to get there. All right, let's go to the next question. All right, Jav asks, when I load multiple patches slash sounds into the slots of Halion only one sounds, do I have to toggle something to have them all sounding at once? So if we are inside of Halion Sonic, and we go to play a particular patch, they would all be on by default to 16 different MIDI channels. So if I wanted to load up, let's say something different than a hip hop kit, I'll just load up some patches here. So right now we look at that, that's on MIDI channel 1. And if I wanted to layer this sound with it, what I would need to do is to put this on MIDI channel 1 as well. Now, so if I wanted to make kind of a big stack sound, just place them all onto the same MIDI channel. So let's put in something a little. So now when I put this on MIDI channel 1, all of those will be stacked together. So by default, they'll be set up as a multi-timbral operation. But when we are working, if we wanted those all to be layered, just simply assign them all to the same MIDI channel that you have the track being sent to right there. Then you can create some really super thick layers. Right. All right, so you just see from Patrick Bannerville A says recently HZ, I guess I assume Hans Zimmer tweeted future is going to be AI. Been a Cubase user for years. How should we update ourselves? How can we use AI wisely with Cubase? Include any AI support in Cubase in future. So, there's already, if we could think of spectral layers, one is definitely AI. Being able to extract the chords from an audio file is AI by definition. You could also create harmonies inside of Cubase. So, of a vocal file based on a chord track and have those be musically correct and have different voicing options. That's probably considered AI. So, there's lots of stuff that's already in Cubase, and you'll see some of the different functions in Nuendo for like the voice separator, tonal match, that are using AI algorithms as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's been in Cubase that you could say has been AI for years. But I still think, people are going to be creating for a long time. All right. So we see clarification from Val. Says, regarding my question about MIDI channels, yeah, it only sends MIDI through on a fourth channel in Halion Sonic. Every other VST, like Massive Serum, works just fine. It sends to all MIDI channels. So, make sure that when if you want to send me a screenshot, Val, it'd be great to see if you have like the channel set here or if it's a track preset that you've loaded up, and the track preset is actually contains channel 4, but as you just saw, as I open up Halion Sonic, it's working with all different MIDI channels that are layered together based on what is selected. But if you want to send a screenshot, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to take a look at it. You good point from DJ FK that AI can't cry. So it's good. All right, so music for World Peace Records. Taylor asks, in Halion Sonic 7, how would 5 sounds be distributed over 4 cores? So again, it would just kind of come over here, and when you go to the options, you would just select how many cores that you want to use. So if you say, okay, and I think the default answer here to how many cores you want to set is you want it to be 2 less cores than what you're actually what your system is capable of. So if you have a 6 core, you could choose 4 core, but just again, when you go to the options menu in Halion Sonic, just go to multi-core, and then you could set it for 4 cores there. Michael Team so dedicated making a live stream while his internet is down from his phone. So okay, so we see Jack B says thanks for the instructions. Unmuting all automation works perfectly. So it's great. All right, Red Groover asks, hi Greg, how do you have a backup regime? If so, what files are most important in your opinion? So I try to be very careful about making sure that all of the, when I do a project, and this is like a really critical step that a lot of people miss, and let's say we create an empty project, is that each project goes into its own unique folder. And this way, all audio that's recorded will be placed into that folder. When we drag files in, there's a preference so that we could say, if you go to editing to audio, that on importing audio files, that we copy all files to the project folder. So once we have, so this way, if we take a loop, we drag it in, that gets placed into the audio folder that's automatically created within the project folder that we defined. If I'm working with samples, if I'm working for samples like with utilizing something like Groove Agent or Pad Shop, I will drag those onto an audio track so that those samples are preserved in the project file. I'll mute that track, and then when I need to actually go to, that way all the media, so samples, loops, can all be stored in one folder, and then I could just simply back up that particular folder. I'm not doing kind of personal projects a lot of time that require backup, but I would put it onto a separate drive, like a little portable hard drive, put it onto a cloud, if you have a Dropbox account or something like that, a Google Drive, those types of cloud-based solutions work really well for a lot of people. And if you were sloppy with different files, and maybe one of the other options is just to do a backup project. And once you do this, it'll ask you to create a new folder. So we have to define a new folder. We'll come over here, and then we'll open that folder. We could give the project a name. We could minimize audio files, remove unused files if we don't need to back up the video or the mixdown folder. So we could have different options for backing up there. So let me know if that makes sense, Red Groover. Luxy Studio says, hey, I'm Dickens from Kenya using Cubase 13 Pro and experimenting with some output latency when I import stems. What could be the problem? So, let's see, experiencing some output latency when importing stems. What could be the problem? So let me know, if you are running into latency like when you're recording or just when you're mixing the file. So while you take files, so if you're importing stems, they should all be kind of playing back at the same time. And if you're recording on top of the imported files and you have plugins on into session that kind of add to a latency that's a little too high, you can come over here and click on the bottom left hand corner. You will see the constrain delay compensation button, and you could try to turn that on. But generally importing files shouldn't really have any latency with them. Latency could be caused by plugins that are running on the stems. So let me know, if you're just taking files, dragging them into the project, and then there's latency, or let me know if they're just out of time. It may not be latency, but maybe it was the timing for how it was exported on the other end. So if you give me some of that information, Lexi Studios, that would be appreciated. All right, Xerix M asks, "Hi Greg, how do I stop drums MIDI from activating my bass? My perfect drums MIDI channel activates my bass. Contact Eurobass 3. How do I stop this and make sure that the bass only reads the bass MIDI?" So it probably maybe when you go here, it's utilizing the same drum. Maybe it's using the same MIDI channel. So a lot of times when we work, if you have drums, if you're using a drum map, one of the things that can be problematic is that the drum map can rechannelize. So if these are being sent in the drum map to the wrong source, then it will play the sound. But it sounds like somehow it's being sent to the same MIDI channel. So, and Cubase is going to send MIDI channel, that MIDI channel data, from the drum. So check when you look, if you select the drum notes, check to see what their channel is. So if this is set to channel 3 where your Euro bass is, then it's going to play back the bass. If this MIDI channel is sent to the correct output port and to the correct MIDI channel, then it will play back the drums. So just check that just to make sure that there's not a routing issue with the MIDI channel. It really sounds like there's a MIDI channel assignment that's incorrect. All right, so we see Steve O says, you upgraded Cubase 13 Pro, says more bang for my money. Keep doing what you do, Cubase people. All right, inactive user asks, "Hi Greg and chat, how are you today?" I think everyone's doing great. I have a question. How can I use sends the correct way? Do I have to turn the fader of the effects track or the send volume fader? Okay, so we just take a couple of files here. All right. We just grab some loops. I'll do these because they're dry. All right, and I'll just separate these quickly. Okay, so let's say we have our vocal.
I feel the way.
All right, so now I want this to come over here. So let's add an effects channel to the group. So I'm going to add a reverence reverb. Okay, so to that selected channel. So once I come here, and how we blend that reverb in is with the send control right here. And if we were on like the channel editor, we would see kind of our sends here, and let's say our destination. So let's say as we listen to this now, I want to blend the reverb in.
Feel the way.
So now as we move this line over, we're sending it to the reverb. And I'll put this on like a bigger reverb here. All right, so as I now adjust this level, now we could also have this be pre or post fader. Excuse me. All right, so this could be pre or post fader. So as we come over here. So as I drag this down, we're not feeding any sound into the send. But if I right click and we move this to pre-fader, the send won't have, the fader won't have any balance between it. So I could just come, move the fader down. We're only hearing the reverb, and its gain structure is not being affected by the fader. So the louder I have this track, it's not going to affect the balance between those two. But if it's set to post fader, this is how much of the signal is being heard and how much is also being sent. And this affects the gain structure that's going into the effect as well. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. Okay, so we see from inactive user, how can I sidechain a compressor to my lead vocal so that the delay is ducking down when I speak and turn up when I stop speaking? All right, so I think, one of the things that you could do is kind of duplicate the track. Some of the delays can automatically do this for you. So if we go to, let's say, an insert, let's come over to our multi-tap delay. So I will take our send, I'll turn that off, and let's just kind of blend, let's say our mix. Okay, we'll set that to 50%. Okay, so now as we come over here, we could say we want a quarter note delay. So you could just set up your Docker right here. So when she's singing,
I feel the way. Na 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 na.
So, and you could play with the release time there. So that's the easiest way to do it. So you don't even really have to do sidechaining. You just do ducking with the delay in the multi-tap delay right there. So let me know if that makes sense for you. So we see Best Green Jesus. Anyone worried about AI really isn't an artist. Yeah. I think there's a lot of companies that want to push AI so that they own all the copyrights as well and can monetize it. So, all right. Darren Flake asks, "Hi Greg, what's the difference of using routing and direct routing in a busing situation? Thanks." All right, so the main difference that we're going to run into is with direct routing, we can't really adjust the levels. So I will come over here, let's set up, we'll do it for our drums. So let's say I want to create, we'll come here, I'm going to create 2 group channels. Okay, and I'm going to go to the full mix console. So if you're not familiar with direct routing, I'll just come here. So we'll go to our direct routing, and you may have to turn this on when you go to the setup window. You can choose kind of that, but we have direct routing. So when we are taking let's say we have our sends here, and we send this to group 1 and to group 2. So now if we wanted to do this for all the tracks, we can send that, and we could vary the amount of the signal that's being sent out. So when we play this particular track, it's going to be sent to both groups. So we see it going to group 1 and group 2. And I could change the amount. So if I wanted to send it more to group 1 and less to group 2. But if I was doing it as direct routing, I would just come over here to our direct routing, and we'll say, okay, I wanted to send it to group 1. And we could also send it to group 2. All right, and we may have to kind of go over here and turn on direct routing summing mode on. So we go to the settings. We'll do this. So now we can't necessarily change the routing of it, but we can now just kind of, again, come over and send these to the different sources in fixed amounts. So some people will use groups, and they may use 8 different effect sends, and they want those for all of their effects, and they just want to do parallel processing where they're not changing the levels. Then you could use direct routing for that. Robbie Bowling says he has no use for AI. We have brains, and we either use them or lose them. So, all right, great to see Lawrence from Barn Door Recording. Glad you can make it from Rhode Island. We have Alan David Daly saying hello to everyone. All right, we have Bob Smythe, Sway TV. Says, hi Greg, how are the cats? So my cat's doing pretty well. And again, I'm sorry, I may have to leave in about 25 minutes to pick up my wife from a medical appointment. But we'll try to get as many questions answered as we can. All right, so we have Harry Joe checking in from Nigeria. And then my chat field jumped on me. All right, Jab just asked same time on Tuesday night, so yes, unless there's daylight saving time change where you live. All right, Mind Gallery Voodoo says, hi Greg, great stream as always. While we're talking Halion Sonic, when I open up a MIDI file, it is populated by Halion Sonic. Is there a way to load the MIDI file without Halion Sonic opening? So what you could do is, it's a preference. So when you go to your preference, go to MIDI file, and then you'll see on destination, you could just choose, instead of Halion Sonic Multitimbral, you could just choose MIDI tracks or instrument tracks. So you can do it just like that. Okay, development of a void says howdy to everyone. All right. Val says in Cubase, it doesn't always not select MIDI channel 1, but as a standalone, it is always just channel 4. So let me just see if I have my HalionSonic standalone here real quick. And it might be just a quick setting. So let me just... Then this might be just an old one. Sorry, just get the 7 open instead of HalionSonic 3. So check if there's if there's just a MIDI channel here. So so when I go to open something up here, we open that, and I go to MIDI, it's loading it into MIDI channel 1. But let's undo that. But maybe you have, check to see. I mean, mine seems to be kind of going straight to 1, but maybe you have slot 4 activated. Again, if you want to send a screenshot to me, send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to take a look at it for you, Val. All right, so Jav and Kona just says, had the same issue with my controller, and it was doubling the notes. My controller just Studio Logic SL88 by default when on is on patch 1, but not on instrument 1. I have to select manually. Yeah, so generally, Cubase is accepting whatever MIDI information it's seeing. So if it's, yeah. Okay, so we see Red Groover says, sorry, I wasn't more clear. I was thinking more Cubase's own files, example, RAM presets, etc. So, one of the great things you can do for all of your different files, like when I migrated my last computer to this one for work, I had an i9 MacBook Pro, then went to an M1. So what I did is I just went to the profile manager and I just exported my profile from my old one, and that's the profile that I'm still using on my current computer here. So I just go to my MacBook, and we can see right at that point that it would just, and this is just loading up all the preferences from my previous computers with my key commands, macros, my recent files list, etc. Okay, so we see from inactive users says, thanks Greg, sadly delay I want to use doesn't come with a ducking feature, so that's why I need to use a compressor on the effects track, but how to sidechain it to my lead vocal. All right, so let's take a look, see if we still have that file open. Okay, so let's take this. And I always get this backwards, but we can, and I think if we want to duplicate the track, and let's set this output to no bus, And let's come over. So if we had to manually do it, we'll add, let's say, an effects channel to this. So let's just throw up a random delay here. All right, so as we play this now, we can.
I feel the way. I feel the way.
All right, and we just kill that. All right, so we'll make this quarter note delay, and so what I want to do is on the effects channel track, let's get to the mono delay. And I think if we just put a compressor after it, we'll just do a standard compressor, and let's go to our side chain. So we'll send it to from our vocal channel, and then let's activate the side chain. So we'll just.
I feel the way.
Let me try just switching the order. So I think if you just put the compressor, it might be just feeding it after. So again, I will. Oh, sorry, I had the multi-tap delay there. That's probably confusing.
I feel the way.
Right, so So this way, when you have the compressor after, you sidechain into the compressor, and then the delay can kind of spread out for you. See from Taylor says, used to attend monthly hangouts in New York City, 4-hour round trip tolls to and from, parking tickets. We're missing like 30-minute window to the meter. These hangouts twice a week online are great time and money savers. So yeah, I miss seeing you in person though. So yeah, I used to take the train up, and it's a lot of fun. But okay, so we see Vishnu from India says, do we have a shortcut to put the chords in a strum manner in the MIDI editor? Like if we click and drag the notes, move only a little bit. So there isn't necessarily like a perfect solution for this, but you know, if we wanted to take, let's add a chord track, we can show you a quick tip, and I'll just populate some chord tracks here. Okay, so I'll take these and let's just drag these to this file. I'll glue them. So one of the tools that you could do this kind of quite easily, and I could probably make a logical editor preset, which I should do, is if you just grab this little trim tool and hold down the Alt or Option key, you could just do, you could say, okay, I want my guitar, I want the notes to strum just kind of like that. So if you want to do kind of augment it, so hold down the Alt or Option key with the trim tool, and then you could just simulate strummings quite easily with that. Okay, so we see Jazz Dude just saying, thanks to Yoda Greg, he shows us where the force is hidden in Cubase. So Jab just says, I'd love to see a deeper dive into spectral layers. So there are spectral layers live streams as well. So you could check some of those out. Mike Scheibinger does those, does a great job. All right, so we have Arif B checking in from the Netherlands. All right, great to see Spa Dogs on from Toronto area. Okay, Red Groover asks, where do I find my profile file once it's saved? So what you could do is, you just, when you go to export a profile, so we go to edit, to your profile manager, and then once you go to export it, you just basically, you could save it directly onto a thumb drive, put it on, email it to yourself, whatever you want, and then at that point you could just import it directly into your system. So I think I just emailed it to myself, so you could do it just like that. All right, and we're also saying Jay just wants a general view of special features in PadShop. So there's lots of PadShop tutorials. I just saw, I think Dom Segalos just did one. And check out Gary Gibbons from Hong Kong. He does like amazing stuff, such a wonderful sound designer as well. So let me go to a question because I may have to be leaving soon to go pick up my wife. Sorry about the interruption with that, but I know we had a couple other questions that were mailed in, so let's get to those. All right, so we had this question last time about hitting S on an automation track and selling the parent track. And then I was playing with it a little more. I'm going to try it again, but it seemed like it worked when I was playing with it afterwards. So let's say I wanted to take this particular track, and I'll just go ahead and drop the volume down. And I'm just going to do like lots of automation on it, because I had kind of different results from the live stream. So as I adjust my EQ, so I'm going to go ahead and write the automation in. Okay. All right, so they're running a little behind with my wife, so we may have some more time. So, all right, but let's go ahead and give this a try. All right, it's going to let's open up some different parameters here. So the question was, when we hit S on an automation track, that is soloed. So let's come over. All right, so let me just change my automation panel settings. Okay, and I want to reveal parameter on right. All right, so just going to automate a bunch of parameters here. And every time that we automate a parameter, it's going to open up a new lane in reveal on right mode. All right, so we have all these lanes of automation. So if I have this one selected and we want to solo this particular track, so let's say I will clear all my solos. And hitting the S key before, so yeah, so I had this kind of working, and so I wanted to try this one more time in this scenario. So let's say I have this selected and hit the solo key, and the behavior that was wanted was that this track would solo. So it seemed like it did it for me on some other parameters, and maybe if there are we're in tracks above. See if that changes the behavior. Yeah, let's see if we. Yeah, so just hitting the cell key doesn't seem to work, so I'll pass that along. Then we had a question, how to do a global fade out of all tracks, including MIDI. Okay, so let's jump to a project. Let's jump to something that has like a lot of MIDI and audio in it. Let me just find something. Just open up a different one. This will work. Okay, so when we have projects that have lots of audio and lots of MIDI tracks, so let's say we have this going on, so we have our audio MIDI.
What did you say? You wished.
All right, now generally you're going to have a folder on the project that would be like input and output channels. So if we go to the master fader and we automate our master fader here, we can just automate that. So let's say while we're playing, if we wanted to do like a fade in of this, so I'm going to click on W for write, and as we start the project, it will say
What did you say?
So now if we wanted to write a fade out, we could grab the master fader and all of my MIDI going to virtual instruments. We could just kind of do a horrible fade in, fade out, and automate those right there. So if we're in like a project, so here I took this and look in the inputs and outputs folder, and from there we could actually see our different parameters. So we have some automation that was kind of written, and if we wanted to just kind of put in an automation point here, we can say, okay, I wanted to start fading out right at this point. You could grab the line tool and just say, okay, I want to do just a straight linear fade out. So as we're playing along, and then this track will slowly fade out. And again, and it used to be that this wouldn't be visible on the project window until automation was written in. So if you see a folder on your on the project window, and sometimes it may be at the very top or the very bottom, that says input output channels, at that point you could open that up. You'll see like this domain output, and then you could draw automation in or just simply automate the master fader of the project. Okay, all right, let's jump back. We covered some of our questions already. Let's jump back into our live questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. All right, so we see from Mind Gallery Voodoo says, great, thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody. All right. All right, great to see Matt Elston on. Glad he can make it. Always fantastic to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right. Okay, we see a lot of creative text from DJ FK. See Best Green Jesus giving a shout out to Gary Gibbons. Yeah, I think every one of his patches is just so great. I have such admiration for his abilities as a sound designer. If you haven't watched his YouTube tutorials, they're just fabulous. So. Okay, so let's see if we have any more questions that sneak in. All right, and there's one more from John Costigan, I think, that came in before. Let's see if I can find that. Says I pasted an excerpt from the Nectar MIDI Flex 4 troubleshooting page I found on the Steinberg forum. I don't know if this explains. I think John's having a problem with his Nectar controller. I guess to kind of disconnect it and reconnect it to get it to be recognized. So I don't know if this explains what I'm observing, but I start my Apollo Twin USB first on my DAW startup, or else Cubase responds with an error message says can't reset the I/O unfavorably. I think that interface may be using MIDI in its applet to control panel and interfacing with the Nectar signal, i.e. no MIDI going into Cubase. I realize that this is probably too late to answer on a Friday, but I wanted to get this and accept in this excerpt. And the excerpt says, in Windows, only one application can access the device's MIDI ports at a time. This is the cause of most MIDI communications issues which we encounter in Windows. Most of the time, this is kind of problem is caused by having two music applications open at the same time. In those cases, you simply close your music application and open the one which you would like to use with your Nectar controller first. So I don't think that I don't have a Universal Audio Apollo interface, but my inclination is that it's probably not going to be, accepting MIDI directly in from your Nectar. So if you're going USB communication from the Nectar to your computer, I don't think that that's going to interface through the Apollo Twin software. If the Apollo Twin had a MIDI input, like a 5-pin DIN MIDI input, and you had a 5-pin DIN MIDI output cable connected, then that might, that could be a factor, but I would say it's a slight chance. So I don't think it's that. So, but if you have, again, other USB devices that are on your system, maybe they're taking too much priority or too much power over the devices. And I think I sent you an email earlier that I'd be happy to kind of remotely take a quick look at your system if you want. And even if you wanted to reach out over the weekend, John, I'd be happy to remotely log on to your system and see if we can get it sorted out for you. So. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. All right. All right, Spencer B says, hi Greg, I started Cubase 13 without my interface on. Since then, I've only been able to use the Steinberg ASIO drive and not the Focusrite driver. How do I change this? So when kind of working with this, so I could kind of hot swap different, interfaces. So let's say if go to my studio menu to studio setup, and we look at my audio interfaces here. So I could see any of my audio interfaces. So if I wanted to connect a different MIDI. I wanted to add a MIDI interface or an audio interface. As I come, this would automatically be recognized. So if you're not able to select your Focusrite interface here, then, let me know if the Focusrite is able to play back audio from other programs in your operating system. So, I could just switch this to built-in audio. I could, if this interface was disconnected, I could hot swap interfaces. So you shouldn't be stuck here unless the interface itself isn't being recognized correctly. And if it's not being recognized correctly by the operating system, then Cubase won't be able to necessarily see it. But make sure also that you're using the dedicated, Core Audio or ASIO driver for the Focusrite, and you're not just using kind of like a generic USB. You may have like a Yamaha on the Windows. You may have a generic low latency MIDI driver, or something like that, or it may say like a Steinberg USB MIDI driver, something like that. So make sure you're not using that, and that you have the dedicated Focusrite interface connected. And if it's not allowing you to switch to it, then the interface isn't being seen correctly by the computer, so which may have caused the initial problem to start. All right, so Spa Dog saying have a lovely weekend. So wonderful to see. I always call him Mac McCormick from Minneapolis, Twin Cities area. Mac is a legendary rep. When I first started doing repping Steinberg, it's almost 32 years now. He was the opcode rep. So now he's a longtime friend. It's so wonderful to see you on the live stream, Mac. He was always Mac in the day, but he goes by Mike now. So, and just a legend in the music industry, being just a terrific representative, work for Korg and other companies. So great to see you on the live stream, and I hope you're doing great. Gerald Ely asks from Martinez, California, hey Greg, is it possible to change a project with audio from 44.1K to 48K? Okay, so I'll show you like the quick way of doing it. Okay, so there's a number of different ways. What I find the easiest method to do is just find this one file I usually use for this. All right, so when I select a file, we can see that our project is currently 16-bit 44.1K. So we'll go ahead and listen to it. Don't think that's the actual sample rate for the project. Let me just load up a different one just to make sure. Okay, so let's listen to kind of the key and the tonality of this so we can see that what key we're in. And again, when we select the files, we'll see that they're 16-bit 44.1. So what we want to do is go to our project settings. So we'll go to project setup. So right now we see our project setup, sample rate is set to 44.1. So I'm going to switch this to 48K, hit OK. It'll ask, do we want to convert the audio to the new rate? We'll say yes, convert. Do you want to keep the source files in the pool directory? So the original files, why not? We probably have enough hard disk space. Hard disk space is inexpensive these days. Now, if you have files that are in musical mode, you may get a message about musical mode, and you want to convert the files from musical mode to kind of straight linear files. And this last question can trip people up. Do you want to keep the audio files at their sample positions? Here you want to choose no. So now when I play it back, we look at the files. They're now 48K, 16-bit. Same pitch, same key. We're just playing back at a different sample rate. So if you have it lined up with MIDI, no problems. So again, to do that, just come over here, project menu to project setup, change the sample rate, and you could kind of say yes to every question except for keeping them at their original sample positions. Choose no, and then it's automatically just going to be, you could save the project and everything will be converted for you super fast and easy with that. Okay, so we see from Vishnu, says, thank you, Greg, for the workaround on chord strumming. Okay, so we just see from while I'm gaming, question, what is really bothering me? When will the free warp Control Z bug be fixed? Try to edit multi-tracks and it crashes after 4 to 5 markers. All right, so let's give it a shot. Let's come over here. We can do some warping across multiple tracks. Okay, so let's come over to my audio menu, and I'm just going to do my real-time processing. We'll create warp markers from hit points. I'm going to switch to my free warp tool. Let's zoom in. So let's say I have 3 kick tracks here. And as we zoom in, I'm just going to select, let's say, all 3 of the tracks. All right, let me just drop those in. All right, so let's come over here. We'll just drop our warp markers in. Okay, so let's say these are my warp markers, and I want to move these. So let's do move 1, 2, 3. Add some more, 4, 5. Just doing. All right, so it's like 21, 22 edits, and I'll undo all of them. Let's redo all of them. So it seems to be working for me. So I didn't do anything special, but let me know if I'm doing something differently than you. So, but that was just a number of different edits, kind of all done like that. So let me know while I'm gaming if that's mine is behaving differently than yours. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says, "Don't forget your wife at the doctor, Greg." So yeah, I'm doing okay. She said they were running a little behind, so she's sending me text via updates, but I have to get my son from school and balance all that fun stuff. But so I think we should have some time. Okay, so we see while I'm gaming, he just says I had the phase coherence on. I did the edits to all channels. All right. All right, so I'll select all the channels here. And let me activate in a folder the phase coherence. Okay, so I'll just drop, try scan with phase coherence on. Okay, so now we have phase coherence on. I'll move these all. So all right, so I think it's 20 edits there, 21. So let me just undo. Oh, yep. Okay, I will pass that on. Thanks for pointing that out. So I'll make sure to put down a report tonight and check the time of the crash file. Sorry about that. So it looks like I ran the same thing. And I'll just try one more time, see if it misbehaves again. So let's turn this on. All right, so let me just do some warping here again, see if we get the same result. So phase coherence is on. All right, so say a number of edits here. So I won't maybe go as fast, but we'll see if we undo these. So I'm just holding down the Control Z. Yeah, so it looks like when I go to redo it, so I'll pass that along. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, so we see So yeah, I'll make sure to put that in a report tonight for you while I'm gaming. All right, and he just says, by the way, this is amazing. So, all right, so Best Korean Jesus just says, I got to get better at audio warping. I'll come with questions for the next live stream. Yeah, so I think one of the great things with the warping, is like if you're a little, if you have tracks where people maybe are a little bit off here and there, it could like really save a performance, like especially if you had to kind of clean something up where you're actually doing more of, the actual work for, where you're just kind of doing editing, but maybe you weren't involved in the tracking session. So let's say if I wanted to come here, for those that want to get more familiar with the warping, so if you wanted to take so let's say I wanted to take I have like two guitar parts here, like let's say it's like one is like so if we want to just kind of take this particular file, so if we double click, we could go into our hit points. So let's go to hit points here, and let's just kind of find the threshold, and I could convert these as warp markers. So once I do this and we go to our free warp tool, and you may have to zoom in, you can see kind of basically the initial attack of different elements. And now once we have this tool, as we slide over to the left, we can we see this turn into a white line as we approach kind of the left hand arrow. And what that's going to allow us to do is to just kind of move those events. And if we have snap turned on, we could move it freely here. But if I wanted that event to snap to the grid, now if we have the grid enabled, we can now just have it kind of fall right into like to have it just kind of snap directly to the grid right there. And if we're doing this for multiple tracks, again, we can come over here, and a lot of times you could also just choose to go to the real-time processing and say create warp markers from the hit points, create warp markers from the hit points. So I guess we could do both at the same time. And now when we select our free warp tool, we could take like maybe a microphone recording and a DI recording of the same acoustic guitar, and then we can move both of those to correct timing problems. So if you're dealing with, maybe a bass player that's a little ahead of the beat or behind the beat consistently, you can just very easily kind of come in and just kind of clean up those performances really easily and very well. So that's how you can kind of get started with warp editing for you, Best Korean Jesus. Okay, so we have DJ Mixes. Just says, hi Greg, greetings from Switzerland. I'm using Cubase 13 Pro. Is it possible to use two different loops and switch between the two? So you could definitely, it depends. There's different approaches to this. So let's say we'll do a new project. So let's say I want to go to a drum loop. So we'll come over here. All right, so now we could kind of drop this loop in, and I want to go to this loop right after. this, and so we can so if you wanted to just kind of copy and switch back and forth between different loops. Now, if we have these loaded into Groove Agent, something like that, which is a great tool for loop manipulation. So we'll come over here, and I could drag this sample to one pad and grab this to another, and then I can just all right, so let's say if we wanted to, so we could trigger this from MIDI. So you could be able to kind of switch back and forth, and if you wanted these to only play, so if we go to to the sample, we could actually choose for these to be in one shot or alternate. So if we wanted these to play continuously, we could come over and let's just put it, if we wanted to now, just come over here and say one shot. So when I just trigger it, it'll play that until the end of the loop. And you could alternate just by playing different MIDI notes if you wanted to, or clicking with the mouse. So, or if you wanted to just play until release, there's different options. So you could do it kind of on a project window, or actually just take it on the, take it into an instrument like Groove Agent and drag and drop and just kind of perform the loops very quickly. Okay. Okay, DJ Mad says, hello, is there a way to change or highlight the scale colors in the MIDI editor other than the default option? Okay, so let's take a look. I'll just add a chord track here. All right, so we'll make that E major. All right. All right, and then we'll end on a C major chord here. All right, so I'm going to select this track, and I'm just going to populate the area. So we'll go to chords to MIDI. So now we can double click and see this in the MIDI. So if we want to adjust, so we come here and we could have our scale assistant, we're going to use the chord track. And we want to colorize based on scale and chords. So I think that we will have, all right, so I think if we go to the setup, that here we could see that this is within the scale. So none. So if you wanted to just change the colors here, so we could say the chords. So if we wanted these to, be different colors, whether it's within the scale or the chord, so we could do that. So as I wanted to come here, let's move this note here, this G sharp, to let me just have it not be following the chord track here quickly. Excuse me. So as we look at this kind of in our full scale, if I move this G sharp to G natural, we could see, so once you select the scales and chords, if you go to the setup window, then you could change the colors for different areas. So if this note is within the scale but not in the chord, or if we move this, let's say, to an F sharp 2, we can just kind of move to different, so you can set the different colors for different scale options. Again, once you go to the select the color scheme, and then you could set up the colors for each of the scenarios. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. See, Michael Teams says he's always confused with free warp. Guess I just need to practice with it more and more. Try to record someone that has really bad rhythm. So it could be that you play really well, Michael. If you're recording someone that has really bad rhythm, then you get to learn the free warping very, very well. So just like, you learn how to tune vocals when you work with a vocalist who sings out of tune. So, so you might have to give yourself other practice scenarios if you play in time. So, but for those musicians, we've all played with them growing up, whose maybe their timing wasn't as impeccable as expected. It's a great choice for that. So. Yeah, so we just see some discussion of computers for composing. So yeah, a lot of composers do 128 gigs of RAM, 256 as well. So, and some of the other people mentioned, like Hans Zimmer, Alan Silvestri, Tom Hulkenberg, as well as Ludwig Göransson, who just won the Oscar this week for Oppenheimer. All right, Darren Flake asks, question, how to set the project root key if it is minor or major? So, there's within sample terminology as part of the metadata, that's why it's called a project root key as opposed to a project key. So it doesn't really differentiate between minor, or major or Mixolydian or Phrygian modes. So it's just kind of like what the basis for the root chord is, and it doesn't really, for metadata within samples and other parts, it doesn't really differentiate between major or minor within the particular chord within particular loops. So there's not really metadata that supports major or minor with that. So, but you could set kind of the project root key, but if you're doing editing, if you're using the chord track, you can use this as the basis to scale, as the basis for editing for Vari Audio, and this as the basis for editing MIDI information. And a project root key really comes into play when dropping loops in, so that the loops can have the same kind of root, but some of the loops may be major, some may be minor, diminished, augmented, different chords. But generally, the project root key, by definition, is why it's called the root key as opposed to the project key. Okay, so we see DJ Mad says, hello, about the colors in the scale question. I was talking about the background, not the MIDI itself. All right, so let's say while we are here, let's go to preferences, and then I will just take my let's see, under color schemes, let's say I want to go to the editor area background. So let's say if I change that, and if, let's say, so maybe more obvious here, so let's say if we go to our scale assistant, here we could show kind of scale root note guides. So as soon as I come here, now we can see that we are in the key of, depending what key that we're in, that we could see kind of the guides for, so once we come over here, we can see that, we're not going to have an A flat. We're not going to, so we could have our different, guides here, but I don't think that these individual notes are, those different scales are colorized, but we'll just look at the preferences. So if we go to our editor area background, so yeah, I don't think, the grid lines, or we could change that into cycle lines, but if you want to change the lines there, we could do that as well. Sorry for misunderstanding. All right, I just sent a quick text to my wife. Hang on. All right. Okay, John Barry asks, hi Greg, quick question. What is the modifier key to switch to trim tool so it trims the start of the notes? Cheers. I think it's just the Alt or Option key. So let's grab the trim tool here, and you can just do it just like that. So the Alt or Option key. So if we undo that, then you can just trim the notes like so. Okay, so we see Uno Memento says, Mike, come to my place, just doing free warp right now. He's a pro in that, and get some ice cream with you. So, sounds good. All right, we see John Barry just says, cheers, perfect. All right, we'll see if there's more questions coming in. Okay. Okay, DJ Mad asks, another question. Is there a way for Cubase to take plugins, pictures automatically, or is it just a one at a time thing? So, yeah, it's going to be a one at a time thing. And when I get a new plugin on my personal system, and sometimes, I guess the manufacturer could provide a thumbnail image that's installed with the plugin. I don't think most will, but if you wanted to go to a particular plugin here, so let's go to just open up, let's say my inserts here, and all you have to do, if you're not familiar with it, is like maybe you want the plugin to be in a different state, just come over here and click on the camera, and that will take a picture and store it on your system. So now when we go to like your VSTI and we say, okay, I just want to go to media, and let's go, I'll sneak home and say, okay, I want to find my VST effects. I want to look for EQs that we could now see all of our plugins. So what I do is, as I get, maybe a suite of plugins, I take, it takes 2 minutes. If you have like 50 plugins, open the plugin, take a snapshot, close it, and you'll see the snapshot automatically populate here. So you could always have their third-party plugins just provide snapshots, and they could install it as part of the installation if they wanted to. See, Uno Memento says, I use FreeWarp because my musicians are so bad to have to constantly fix their playing. It could be kind of a dangerous road to go down because it makes it really easy for everything to be kind of super tight. So whereas you may get, sometimes I would ask people to do a different performance. I know that by the time I asked them to do it, I could fix their timing issues with an edit with FreeWarp very fast. All right, Forward Thinker asks, Hi Greg, when I'm trying to edit clip gain using the pen tool, it can sometimes be tricky to select nodes. I often create new nodes instead of selecting existing nodes. Do you have any tips for this? All right, so let's take a look at it here. All right, so I'm not sure if you are, so let's say if I'm here, I have my clip gain. So I'm not sure if you're using kind of the pencil tool to draw in nodes. So if you are doing the pencil tool, at this point, just kind of clicking on it. And let's see if there's any visual indication. And this is really, kind of an older methodology called dynamic events that was in Cubase VST or Cubase Audio 1.0, I think, on Mac for DAE. That once we are here, so if I just kind of hover, so you see kind of by default, as we do this, there's a black line. So if we just have that black line, so see how forgiving it is. So I just kind of line up. So let's say, if we don't have it selected. So maybe if you select it, and then while you have the pencil tool, where the black line, that kind of can show you where it's centered. And then you can move the nodes there. So let me know if that is the nodes on the clip gain. So okay, so I see just a further comment. It says, drawing nodes with the pencil. So, but it seems like, it's maybe not so forgiving, but it seems like it's kind of works as if I'm in the ballpark and just kind of grab with the tool, that I'm not accidentally adding different nodes, and I'm not super zoomed in as well. So, here I could probably do that more accurately, but even kind of zoomed out where I'm seeing, 4 bars here on a segment, just kind of selecting it with, the tip with the end of the pencil tool seems to be working pretty well for me without adding unwanted nodes. And I guess if you do add an unwanted node, you could do that, but there isn't really like a good way of editing. It's more kind of a visual reference. So I probably don't have any tips really to offer in that regard. So. All right. Okay. So we see from Darren Flake, thanks Greg, question on how to print send or bus effects to tweak them, thanks. Okay, so we see how to print a send effects or bus to tweak them. So if we wanted to take a particular, so let's jump back to this project here. So I'm not sure if you want to print like the effects channel. So let's say if I want to print the effects channel for this, so let's say, like if I wanted to just print that effect, the reverb. All right, so let me just see if I come over here to the visibility. I'll just kill that. So let's say now if I come to export audio mix down, and let's say this channel is going to reverence. So, and I'll go to my effects channel tracks, and I'm going to select reverence, and I'm going to set the left and right locators maybe around the event, and we'll export, and I'm going to create an audio track. So export audio. Okay, so now if we just solo this, guess I had to. All right, let me just isolate. Because I had other sources feeding effects in for. So let me just come back to my visibility. So, but you could just print the effects just like that. So if you go to export to audio mix down, you could now just come over and just export that one particular effects return channel, and then in the export audio dialog, just come over here and choose to create audio track from that. Let me know if that's what you're wanting to do, Darren. Okay, DJ Mad asks another one. How do you go about cutting the silence parts in a vocal? Example, the quiet parts that you normally clean. I do it manually, but I've seen people use the hit points or other ways. So let's see. I think I may have. See if I still have that file with. All right, let's do new project. Okay, I'll just put some silence in real quick, like a little gap between the events. All right, so let's say I want to get rid of, I look at this and I'll just create these as, I'll bounce the selection. Okay, so we have this file and we want to just kind of get rid of all of the silence. So if we select a file, go to your audio menu, and I think it's under advanced, move down. So, and you'll see detect silence. So basically what you could do is you could adjust the threshold. So we will come over here, let's just knock the threshold down a little bit. And now I'll say process, and that would get rid of all the dead silent areas. So once again, come over here, select the event, audio to advanced, detect silence, and you can kind of see visually the threshold here. So you could set the open threshold and close threshold, and you could set those. And if you wanted that to be independent, so if you wanted to be opened at a higher threshold, but maybe the release to be lower, we could now just kind of come right over there, or you could link those two and boom, do a detect silence, and then all the other parts will be stripped out for you. Okay. See, Uno Momento just says he's just about the audio warping. He says you won't get better musicians with these fees. It's not like they're playing just a little bit wrong. So, all right, we see Forward Thinker just says I never noticed the black line. I'll look for it. Thanks. All right, DJ Mad asks, can you explain the difference in applications between RMS and peak in the channel strip compressor and why? So when we're doing, our dynamics processing, so let's say we come over here to the channel strip and we open up the compressor. So we could choose between whether we want, the compression to take more advantage of kind of the overall volume level. So if we wanted to be dealing with that levels of dynamics, or if we wanted it specifically for peaks, maybe more for corrective, like someone just happened to be talking very softly and all of a sudden had one loud note and you wanted to regulate that so that, but you wanted maybe character applied to the overall average, or if you wanted to be more tailored towards peaks for maybe more corrective purposes. So that's the difference between the two of them. Okay, so Daja asks, Cubase Pro 13, hi Greg, do both bounce and render in place make any audio warp changes to a clip permanent? So when you do a bounce selection or render in place, what it's actually doing, it's not making those permanent, but what it does, it's actually going to write and create a new audio file. So when we do a render in place, the original file is still there in the project, but we could render a new audio file with the resulting changes embedded. So within the new file, those are permanent. We can't go back and adjust the warping and just undo the warping on a new file. We can on the original file, and that's the same way with the bounce selection. So when we do the bounce selection like we did here, let's see if we can, so if we drag these in, these are all, let's say, separate files, and as we move these around as we see fit, we can now just place. So, if we have warping that's done on these particular files, so we can say, okay, I'm doing this, and I do a render in place on this file. So we'll say, okay, I want to make this channel settings. We hit render. This file is now rendered with those changes, but if I wanted to unmute this file, I can come over here and make those changes, and this file isn't affected. So we took those changes into account when creating the new file, either through a render in place or bounce selection, but I can't necessarily just say, oh, I just wanted to adjust the fade in of this file, because this file, the fade in is kind of embedded within the file, but the original source file we can still edit. So it doesn't necessarily, get rid of those. They can still be accessible in the project, but we can create a file that doesn't have to do all the math in the background, that just simply plays back an audio file with the result of all the audio warp changes, fades, and other edits. Okay. All right, Uno Memento just says, I rarely have anything to ask Greg. It's because he knows how to tell things clearly and easily if you listen a little. So thanks for the kind words. It's probably because you were one of the few people that's been running Cubase longer than me. So, all right. See, Darren Flake says, last question. What's the difference of sending effect signal via fader and send? Which one is better to work with? So, generally when you have, let's say we have our effects here, and so we'll add an effects channel track to this. So let's say we'll add a reverb. Okay, so, when we, so let's say we play this, and we go to, let's say, our send level. So, this is how much is going into that particular effect. So we're sending this to that effect. Now, if we look at our revelation and this level is down, we could send, so this is our return channel. So if I have a lot of that up, and then I bring this down, we're still having more dry signal blended in to the source, but that source that we're blending in may be louder depending on the fader here. So this is how much of that signal is being sent here and blended in. But if this is all the way down, our return channel is down, as we go to send it in, we don't have as much to work with. So when I adjust this all the way up, now if I increase my return channel, we're kind of swimming in reverb. And now we have it dry. So as we listen to that again, and I bring down the reverb, so this will act as kind of a blend too. So generally, you want this roughly at 0 dB. And then to blend this overall. Now, if you have 100 tracks going on, you say, oh, it's just so wet with reverb, then you could bring this down and attenuate the return channel, and that will bring the reverb down on everything. But a lot of times I would initially start with the send as kind of the level of the effect and blending that in. All right, so we have Zai Fernando. Hi, and he asks, or they ask, hi Greg, thanks for sharing your knowledge. Welcome. I'm always glad to be able to share. If I'm working in a song and after a few recordings I would like to have it faster, like 5 BPM, what's the best way of doing it and keeping the sound quality? So as you record audio into Cubase, it's automatically going to be tempo stamped. So that means if you record a song, it's at 100 beats per minute, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I wish it was a little faster here. What we could do is select all of the audio files, and we want to make sure that they are in musical mode. So once we put those into musical mode, we'll see this little icon in the upper right-hand corner of the event. And now let's say this song is at 100 beats a minute. So as we play, so once it's in musical mode, I could just go to my tempo track here. So I don't have my tempo track enabled, but I have my tempo set to 100. So I can say, oh, let's make it 105. Let's try 108. 112. 88. And you could just kind of type in different tempos. Now, if the tempo track is enabled, we could go to our tempo track, and it may show up at top here. Let me just. All right, so I'll bring this down a little bit, and let's say, okay, I'm going to add a tempo track. And this is a great trick that I I learned kind of in MIDI sequencing time, where you say, okay, we're going to start at our note of 100 beats a minute. So we'll come over here, we'll say 100 beats a minute for that. And let's say as we get into the song, so let's say, okay, right here, I wanted the tempo to just kind of jump up. So we'll say, let's go to at measure 16. I want to take that value, and I just want this to go from 100 to 110. So, speed up the chorus a little bit, slow down the verse a little bit, do a slightly different tempo in the bridge. So we can just kind of come over here and say, okay, we're at 100. Create a little tension. And if I wanted to, so I mean, you could go pretty extreme amounts and still have it sound great. But yeah, if you have something that's a fixed tempo, just kind of change it up a little bit. It's like a great trick for like old MIDI sequencing to have the verse like a beat a couple beat per minute slower than the chorus and speed up the chorus a little bit to give it a little more energy. So there's great tips that you could do with tempo stuff like that. Okay, so we see question. How to adjust a vocal sample that has a different BPM to a fixed BPM. All right, so, just like we're doing here, all you would have to do is once you know what the tempo of that is, place it into musical mode. Once it's into musical mode, it's going to follow the tempo that you have set in the project. So whether it's vocal, any audio file, so put it in once you know what the tempo originally is. And if you don't know what the tempo is, you can, or if it's not set, if you actually go into the pool window, we can now come over and in the pool window here, you could enter the tempo value and make these so that all the tracks are in musical mode as well. All right. All right, great to see Soren from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. Always great to have you on. All right, so we see from DJ Mad says plugin block listed. I have a few ones that are block listed. They are VST3, but when I try to reactivate it, gives me a contact manufacturer message. Is there a workaround? So generally, what's happening is, Cubase will do a bit of a quality assurance test on plugins. And if the plugin fails that generally is going to indicate that the plugin is going to cause system instability. So instead of the program crashing when you use the plugin, it's kind of giving you a heads up that this plugin is probably going to be problematic. So I think the best choice would be to try to contact the manufacturer, let them know that their plugin is being blocklisted. I would venture to say that they probably are aware of it already and that they should make sure that it's, not going to be causing issues for people running VST3 plugins. All right. All right, so we see Soren says, Greg has sent an email about some small way to find the center MIDI events to get to remove overlaps on MIDI events to last Tuesday's Hangout. Maybe you did not get to the scenario special. So I think I'm sorry I didn't get to that. I think I may have had that on. Let me just see if I still have that file here. All right, so I think when we come here, like we had different files. So let's say if I wanted to take this All right, so when we come here, and I think what Soren was running into, sorry, I forgot to do this, is a bunch of files where we want it to maybe change multiple takes right here. So let's say these are set to base MIDI, base MIDI, base MIDI, and we wanted these to go to maybe the first to another take. So I'm going to select all of these, and then I think if we go to, it might be under move. All right, and we'll say move events to back. So I'm going to take these selected ones. Now we move them to the back, and let me just see if do these. All right. So I think, Soren, what you want to do is to take all of these and instead of moving them kind of one by one, so when these are overlapping, and let me just see if we, so putting in lanes. So, but I think, let me just revert this. So I think what Soren didn't want to do, maybe he could just comment, was not have to kind of find a center point of all these constantly to go back and forth. Like in the audio editor, we could go to, let me just see if there's anything. Because they're not really in lanes so much. So I think you might have to kind of work, you know, if it's like this and we wanted all of those. So I think what Soren is looking for is a way to kind of change all of these simultaneously, but because they are all different lengths of different parts, you know, so as we go to the center, so I'll continue to play around with it, but you know, see if maybe once we have this, if we go to edit and we try moving it to back, you know, so we could, in audio, we would do this like in a part editor. But since you have such, you know, oddly overlapping, let me just look in the MIDI and see if there's anything. And let's just look at this. I think there is. And I think if we come over here to MIDI to functions, that if we do the delete overlaps poly, that still won't want to kind of do that. So, but you know, maybe Soren, also if you share some information on how you got to where all these MIDI parts are overlapping. I know you might have done originally like extracting the audio from a very audio, like from a bass part. But if there is, maybe try track versions and see if you do track versions, if that, will allow you to consolidate those parts before doing the conversion. All right, so you see from DJ Mad says, thank you for the great explanation. I appreciate these hangouts. All right. All right, so Carlo R asks, how do you set definition from tempo on a vocal while changing its BPM? Okay, so let's come over. Let's do uninvited here. So let's see if this is all going to be in musical mode. So I'll activate this project. All right, so let me just open up my pool window. All right, so I'm going to select all my files. We'll place them into musical mode. All right, so let's say as we're playing here. So now if I want to change tempo here with the vocals. So now everything is just. So, where you're doing a vocal, it's kind of the same process as with the other tracks. So I'm not sure if you have to do definition from tempo. If we had an entire multi-track that was fluctuating, and I'll just show an example of that. And this does have a vocal in it, but if we are doing okay, so let's say we don't have a recording like a click with this, so we turn on our click and doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So here what I could do if we had varying tempos, something that was recorded live, at this point we will go to our project. Let's go to tempo detection, analyze. Okay, so I'm going to just change my meter here, to where the downbeat is. So we'll just kind of drop that in right there, so we'll listen to it. All right, so I'm just going to hide my signature tempo track for now. Let's select all of the tracks. So what this is going to do is we're going to take all of these particular tracks, all the events, and since this has all the different tempo changes in it that we can see here, kind of laid out for us, at this point we can go to audio to advanced, and we will say set definition from tempo. I will hit OK. And that's writing those files in, whether it's a vocal, saxophone, whatever. So now if we wanted this to play back not at the varying tempo that we have, what we could do now is as we play back, instead of if I just wanted to enter in a steady tempo, so whether it's vocal or saxophone or jazz group, whatever, we could just do it and just kind of enter in and change tempos on the fly to find the right feel, the right tempo. So all right. Okay, so you see from Soren on the project says, well, yes, I was working zoomed in quarter notes, zoom, and it was the workflow issue to get remove overlaps. Of course, it's a matter of zooming out and finding the single triangle, select remove overlaps, or once again, for me, some simpler way to remove overlaps is needed. So I think that, so let's jump back to that project here. So maybe as you're assembling it, the one thing is, I'm not sure if you get a preferences to editing, if you have delete overlaps, like as you're doing the edits, because what this could allow me to do is, once I have this file, I could drag, and I'll just colorize this one just slightly differently. So when I drag this over, now what was underneath is gone. So, but make sure that you go over here to preferences and have delete overlaps enabled. So maybe as you're doing the editing, the overlaps can just be deleted as you do the edits. So I'm not sure if you've done that, but that's a pretty simple way of setting up for delete overlaps. All right, inactive user just says, how can I enter Vari Audio for my vocal track? So really all you have to do is when we go to launch this sample editor, so I will come over here, let's take this file, double click, and that will take you into the sample editor. When I do Vari Audio, I like to kind of go full screen. On the left hand side, we can see the inspector tab. We'll see Vari Audio. Click here, it'll do its analysis of the Vari Audio and of the audio file, and now we're in the sample editor. If I select a different tab, we leave the editor, and now we can just come right back here and do Vari Audio. So you can just double click on a file, go to the sample editor, you'll see kind of the editor value here. So let's say we go to our inspector, so you could double click, open the Vari Audio tab, and we go to the editor inspector, and then you could see the Vari Audio, and you may have to just kind of scroll down to find the correct pitch there. All right. All right, Darren Flake says, I'm setting my interface to 44.1 to watch the live stream, and I'm running a project at 96K. Is there a way to use both at the same time? Cubase project playing slower, that's normal, but is there a way? So generally, the audio interface is going to have one sample rate. So there, isn't sometimes clocks, like when you're using external clock, it could do kind of a division for 48K and 96K. If it's, double the sample rate, some of the clocks can automatically accommodate that. But, generally a lot of people use one audio interface for, like a built-in audio interface for like YouTube and listening to other sources, and one for their audio. But I don't know of an audio interface that can work at two different sample rates simultaneously. There may be one, but it seems like a lot of effort so someone could watch YouTube when they're working in their DAW. So all right, so Soren just says, I'll take that into consideration, Greg, about removing overlaps, thinking now, and I think it'll suit me just fine, actually. Thanks. Yeah, so just be aware of it. Sometimes when you don't, sometimes people could put delete overlaps and like, oh, I put this over and oh, it disappeared. Where is it? So just be aware of it, that you could activate it when needed. All right, so we see from inactive users, says, thank you, Greg, always appreciate. So you're welcome. I'm just grateful to be able to help people. All right. See if we have any more questions. I think I'm going to have to take my son to go pick up my wife in maybe just a couple minutes, but we'll see if there's any other questions that come in. And I just see Uno Momento just replying maybe to Gerald Ely. Let me see if I misunderstood Gerald's question about the sample rate conversion. But if it was, maybe if I misunderstood, maybe I missed a comment, but I just wanted, if you wanted to take your project that's at one sample rate and export it to a different sample rate, here when you go to your audio mixdown, you could choose different independent sample rates than the project is set at. So you could do that, but if you wanted the project for editing and recording more data in to be at the new sample rate, you could do the method that we showed kind of with the classical bass piece. All right. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that sneak in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and if you've learned a new tip or trick, please feel free to like the live stream and subscribe to the channel. And again, we do these on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and it's maybe off an hour because the United States went into daylight saving times this past Sunday, and other countries are going in towards the end of March. But generally it's, and we'll actually be celebrating 4 years of the live stream since we started, kind of ramped it up during COVID. Will be on Sunday, will be our 4-year anniversary. So I'll have to count up all the stats, but I know just in the last year we've had over 2 million, it was like 2.3 million hours viewed of the Club Cubase live streams. So I want to thank everyone for being so great and building such a wonderful community. So I'm honored to be able to help so many people, and I appreciate it. And I didn't think when COVID started that 4 years later that I would still not be traveling, but I love being home and being able to do live streams and be able to help and interact with people all over the world. So it's a real joy for me. All right, we'll see if there's any more quick questions. I probably have just a minute or two before I have to go get my wife from the doctor. All right, so we have the artist known as Love, just says hit the like button. All right, Jab just says he loved the detect silence function. It's great. Yeah, it's a kind of an underutilized function for a lot of stuff. And it used to be like very handy when hard disks were very expensive and everyone's so conscious about being able to save as much hard disk space as possible. So that when you try to get 8 tracks worth of data into 4 tracks. So you didn't want a track playing that was just silence. So we see Jazzy Lomel says, hey Greg, do any of the Steinberg interfaces read SMPTE? So, we used to have a dedicated SMPTE synchronization box called the Nuendo Sync Station. So that would read it, but the audio interfaces don't have a direct SMPTE input. It's not as used today as it was when synchronizing the tape machines was kind of the common workflow for many devices. So, but none of the audio interfaces. But what we can do if you're like synchronizing to consoles, is if we add an audio track, we can come over, just activate this project. And when we add an audio track, here's a little tip is, because sometimes the wow and flutter on a tape machine was always problematic. But if we go to an insert, we could just take this and send it. There's a plugin, so let's get to your inserts under tools, and you could actually have a SMPTE generator. So what you could do is, if you have like 8 outputs on your audio interface, if you needed to send SMPTE to synchronize another device, you could actually send SMPTE timecode from Cubase directly out of output 8 of your audio interface, and then you could send SMPTE out. We have this for people who are synchronizing automation systems on large format consoles with Cubase all the time. So all right. All right, so wonderful. We see Soren just says, Greg, I've tested my scenario now. It would be great with your solution with key command for the preference switch. So yeah, that's a great way. Just, be aware of which mode you're in. And sometimes when you hit the key command, it will give you, like, when it's a preference, will kind of pop up and indicate which one it is. All right, so we'll see if we have any more questions sneak in. If not, I'm going to go. My son should be home any minute. And I'll go get my wife from the doctor's office. And we'll see if there's any last minute questions. And we look forward to seeing everyone back on Tuesday's live stream. And if you want to send questions in advance, you can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So once again, I appreciate everyone's. All right, so Jazz Dude saying last chance to smash the like button before the weekend. So I appreciate all the effort that Jazz Dude has done in the 4 years of just being such a wonderful co-pilot on the live streams, and for all his help with people. I'm just forever grateful for you and your efforts. And for everyone just as part of our Tuesday and Friday families. So I'm just so appreciative of everyone. So with that, I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please have a wonderful weekend. Please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back on Tuesday. Thank you very much, and goodbye.